Welcome to the most horse-powerful podcast on the internet, the Xbox Drive. Before we get this show on the road, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and ring that bell on YouTube, and leave a 5-star rating or review on your podcatcher of choice. If you want to continue the conversation after the show, make sure you join the Carpool Gaming Discord. For exclusive content and all the Carpool shows in one simple feed, head over to patreon.com/carpoolgaming. Finally, head over to carpoolgaming.com for all of your merch needs. Now, with all that out of the way, you better buckle up, Buttercup, because it's time for the Xbox Drive.
Greater than X.
Hey everyone, it's me, Sean Capri, and I'm glad you're here because you're listening to the most horse-powerful podcast on the internet. It's the Xbox Drive. I'm on a Skype call with my friend Ryan Turford. He's the meteorologist on a moose and on our journey today. Holy crap, Ryan. Hellblade is here, man.
First of all, Sean, the waves of nostalgia. Xbox Drive is back, baby. It's been a long time since we've done this.
Ryan, all truth be told, I actually seriously considered doing the entire review for Hellblade 2 Senua's Saga in my car. I did get in the car. I went to go get a drink because I was nervous about calling the thing a masterpiece before I knew what anybody else thought about it. Yeah. And it turns out everybody hates this game.
That's not true. The best part was, Sean, was like you and I talked about it before the reviews went up, and we both agreed.
After I recorded mine, after I did, I put it out there, and I begged you. I'm like, I've got to know what you think of this game, man. I'm dying over you. I don't know what anybody in the world thought of that game.
But I was the first one in the world to tell you what I thought about it, and I liked it. So, I mean, it's one of those things where we both liked it, and some of the world's wrong. Now, mind you, some of the world is on our side, Sean.
Yes.
There are lots of people. In fact, if you go and look at the Metacritic, it's hilarious because either this game is getting a 9 or a 10 from someone, or it's getting a 5. There's no in between. There's like hardly any 7s. It's very much, it's either getting a 9 or a 5.
It's difficult for me to approach what we're doing tonight with our review discussion, which we will remain spoiler free up until a point. So if people are here to join us, they will be spoiler free for a moment. And then, we'll jump into more of the story beats.
Likewise, if y'all are watching on YouTube later, because we're recording this as a live stream right now, or if you're listening on audio feeds, we will have that time stamped out.
Yes.
As when the spoilers start. So don't worry about spoilers until that specific point where we tell you spoilers are happening. We'll even give you all a minute to get out of the call first. Before we get into it.
I mean, it's hard for me to jump into this. I've already had, my opinion out there, doing the review, did it on here on the YouTube channel at Carpool Gaming. Been talking about it in the Discord quite a lot today. Ryan, we don't know. We've seen your tweets, but we don't know what your thoughts are. Maybe we'll start kind of high level. You played this game. Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2 is the title of the video
Seth, of course, corrects us.
Yes,
He's on top of things. Now, before I get into it real quick, I want to say that you and we took very different approaches to playing this game. And I wanted to get that out there. In fact, I specifically played the game a specific way because I knew how you were going to approach this review. Because you specifically played Hellblade 1 and then Hellblade 2 basically in the same week. Right?
Yes.
How that kind of
same
out?
day. Yeah, I rolled credits on Senua's Sacrifice in the morning, whatever the day that was, Wednesday, I think it was. And then that night started playing the sequel. So yeah, I think I've got that kind of a unique experience, but also set me up to go, this is what this game should be.
For sure. And you definitely took the approach of someone who's new to Hellblade, someone who's just getting into it with the sequel, which is a lot of people out there, I think, because a lot of people missed this game when it came out in 2017, the first one anyways, the first Hellblade. Whereas I wanted to take the approach of someone who had played the game previously. So I purposely made sure not to go back to the original game before playing Hellblade 2, because I wanted to see the approach of, does everything still make sense if I just watch the recap that's at the beginning?
Yes.
And just play through it.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make people aware that we approach this review and playing the game differently, which I think is a good thing. I did that purposely to make sure we have 2 different views.
It's so funny. So Ryan, for those who don't know, Ryan and I used to do the Xbox Drive together for many, many years, actually, for hundreds of episodes.
Yep.
So Ryan knows me very well, and I know Ryan quite well, I would say as well. But as you mentioned that, Ryan, the way that our memories work, I think that we're coming into this with the exact same experience. So you have years between playing the first game and the second game. I have mere hours, and I feel like I probably remember it as well as you do because your memory is so strong and my memory is so weak. So
I don't know, because there were things that I definitely forgot from the first game because like there were like certain like the big moments, for example, from the first game. I definitely remember, I remember wading through like the pool of blood and stuff like that. Like I remember like big moments from Hellblade 1, but I don't remember everything about it. But I think the recap, to give it credit, I think it did a good job of basically giving you all the information you need to know going into this game. Because Hellblade 2, what's nice, Senua's Saga Hellblade 2.
Yeah, it's Hellblade 2.
Yeah, we're just going to keep saying Hellblade 2 for the discussion. I feel like it's good like that they had that recap there because like there isn't a lot of stuff that ties in from the original game. But there are some little things, and it's good to have some context there. So I thought the recap they did at the beginning was good. So now all that out of the way, Sean, transitioning to my thoughts. I love this dang game.
Yeah.
It was honestly like I put the tweet out. In fact, I scheduled it right like and actually stayed up till 4 a.m. when the game launched in order to press the send button because I couldn't schedule it because I did like a multi-tweet. And
you can't schedule those? Golly.
No. Elon, but I was like, you know what? I'm up playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth anyways.
Of course.
I may as well just wait and just do it. So
what a game to bring up within this conversation.
Look, that's a whole other can of worms.
In the comparison. Oh my gosh. Do you want a game that's tight or do you want a game that's got anyways?
I
haven't played the other game. I haven't played Final Fantasy.
I was going to say it's either mini games the game or the tight 6 to 8 hour experience.
We can have both.
Yeah, you can definitely have both. In fact, I don't know if you knew this, Sean. You can have lots of different types of games with differing variations of length and gameplay.
Hang on, that's so complicated. I'm going to get a nosebleed. What the hell, man?
Yeah. No, I love this game. First of all, the thing that struck me the most, and I know that, talking to you about this, that the thing that also struck you is the same as me is the story. The story in Hellblade 2 is excellent. Mm-hmm. And I love how tight the narrative is as well as the way it's paced. That was one of my favorite things about it is why I couldn't put it down. Like I basically played this game in one day because I couldn't stop playing it because I wanted to stop. I was like, okay, I kind of want to take a break, but I'm like, no, I need to know what happens next. I need to know like what happens around this corner and stuff like that. So yeah, the story was so well paced. Like it felt like I was watching like a 6 to 8 hour movie in a lot of ways, in a good way is what I'm trying to say, where it had me hooked. It was the same feeling I had watching the Fallout TV show in a lot of ways, where I just, I felt so invested in Senua's story and what was happening that I just, couldn't stop myself. I couldn't stop myself from experiencing it further because I really enjoyed that. But also the combat, like I loved the approach to combat this time around over the first game. Like I felt like it was a big improvement. Yeah. And then just, of course, a lot of people have mentioned this, even in the negative reviews, but just the visual design and the audio design, like chef's kiss. Like this is one of the prettiest games you will ever see. In fact, Sean, if you collect movies, there's a certain term that gets thrown around.
Yes.
It's called reference discs. Where if you want to
That is not where I thought you were going. I started smiling. I thought you were going to talk to me about Criterion Collection.
Well, this would fit in something like the Criterion Collection in a lot of ways, Sean. But it felt to me, but when we want to test out our home theaters and we want to see what our big TV can do.
In the review, there's actual footage of me talking about like back in my day, we used to like bring people around and like have like the Matrix, like the hallway scene where everything gets shot and everything. Like you put a surround sound.
People still do that with 4K for 4K Blu-ray, Sean.
Yes.
That's a big thing in the 4K collecting community is like discs that are reference disc material.
Yes.
And I would consider this the equivalent of that from a visual standpoint.
Yes. Well said.
It feels like if you want to give someone the idea of what can the Series X do, just plop them in front of this game and have them watch it for an hour. Because it's a treat for the eyes in so many ways. But again, I feel like I'm getting that out of the way now because I feel like that's probably the least important thing about this game.
That's how I felt. Yes.
But it's also an important note as to it's something to celebrate because I think that it's a proud moment for Ninja Theory, who's always been great at, visual design in their games. Going back to either Hellblade 1 or even stuff like DMC, like all those games looked awesome in the times that they were released in. So that's always been their craft is visual design, but also the audio, Sean, like I felt like it was a big improvement over 1. Like I loved, especially with a 3D audio headset. Just hearing the way that the voices travel around the back of your head. Like, dude, this game was so cool. So
you wanted to be able to block out the rest of the world to really get into this game. And you talk about like the technical aspects, and I don't want to like glance over it either, but I feel like it's always like it's in service to the thing. I almost in my review talked about how like this isn't like a crisis moment, like, but I couldn't say it without explaining.
No, but you also have to understand, Sean, that it like adds to the experience in a lot of ways because I feel like if the visuals were awful, they'd have to find it for like the story, the way they told it probably would lose at least a little bit of weight with the way the story is told in this game if the visuals were like terrible, like if they were janky or something like that, right? Like because just like when you're watching a really good movie or TV show, the visual design usually is one of the aspects that adds to the storytelling in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, and as good as games have gotten, like as good looking as games have gotten recently, it's so rare that you just sit there almost the entire time and go like, holy crap. I turn around this corner and another holy crap. And I'm, washed up on the shore and everything is dark and terrible and awful. And those rocks look sharp and uncomfortable and it adds to the atmosphere. That's what you get in this game. Or you're in a cave and the audio is bouncing around like that looks excellent. So you light up a flare or a torch and the lighting looks great. And just like it adds to it, like I said, it's not just a technical showpiece. It just adds to the overall experience. So I'm glad you brought it up. When I was kind of crafting up my review for the channel, I just felt like I was like kind of paying it lip service almost. Like I didn't know if there was really even like a unique way to talk about how like amazing this looks and how crisp that looks and the realistic blah, blah, blah. And I just felt like I almost added that part into the review. But yeah, I mean, it's undeniable. It's the first thing that you'll see, and quite a lot of people are talking about it on the internet today, which I'm glad at least it's getting some recognition.
No, that's the one thing that everyone can agree on is the visual and audio design for this game in particular are some of the best on modern consoles, period. Full stop. And it might be the best thing we see for a while. And it's also like paints a really interesting future for Unreal Engine 5 games because so far, Sean, a lot of the Unreal Engine 5 games that we've gotten have kind of been disappointing visually speaking.
Dude, I didn't even know we were getting Unreal Engine 5 games.
Yeah.
Which
Fortnite's in Unreal Engine 5.
I know that one. Yeah.
But there's a couple others that have come out and they haven't been amazing. So they've also been plagued with technical problems and things like that, where I feel like, a lot of, like uproar was made with when they talked about the frame rate. Dude, I want to tell you something. I tried playing this game at 60 frames per second, and it was missing something in a way that the 30 FPS mode felt like it was like that was what this was supposed to be.
Agreed. Yeah.
Like that's how they designed it. And people laughed at the quote from the president of Ninja Theory when he came out and said why they were doing it at 30 frames per second and being like, oh, we want to have it add to the cinematic feel, but it totally does.
I think it does. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I didn't play as long, I think, as you at 60. I really just kind of tested it out.
Well, I wanted to try it out. Like I wanted to try it out for this discussion because I wanted to make sure that we had tested it out because you and I both agree that the frame rate is not the focal point of the conversation we're going to have tonight anyways, but it's good information for people to know because maybe some people want to play it on PC or since we're so used to like 60 being better than 30 in a lot of experiences, it's good to also celebrate when 30 is better than 60 in certain cases too.
Agreed. Yeah. And I mean, like, I'd love to have that kind of like even on a broad level, have that kind of conversation because I feel like we are training ourselves, we being like the overall internet, like training ourselves to have like 5 bullet points on which to evaluate a video game. One of them is like frames per second. Another one is resolution. Another is game length. And, you know, pick 2 others that people get up in arms about. Maybe there's exclusivity in there and something else. And it's like, man, there's so much more depth and beauty in, if we're just talking about visuals, there's way more to it than resolution and frame rate. You know, it's like you're not even talking about like volumetric lighting or photorealism or performance capture or anything like that. It's like, tell me more about how you know so little about how to even talk about this, how to evaluate this.
I was going to say, we're not Digital
about.
Foundry, Sean. Like, we will not pretend to be those people. Like, that's
right,
who we are.
Right. But you can still look at something and go, that looks beautiful to my eyes without counting frames per second or dots on the screen. So yeah, I mean, like, you just look at this game and, you know, I'd love to challenge people. I'd almost love to like put it in front of people and tell them that it's 60 and they go, oh, it looks great. And you go, actually it was 30, like the old Pepsi challenge, Ryan. You put a, you know, blind taste test and people are choosing Pepsi left, right, and center over Coca-Cola. I'm telling you, man.
Yeah. No,
here's my diet.
It's one of those things
I'll have
where
a
like
sip of my Diet Pepsi.
I work in television, and so I'm always I can very clearly see the difference between a lot of frame rates. In fact, it's very easy for me to pick out like what's 24 frames per second, what's 25, what's 30, and even me, I'm just like, yeah, it doesn't bother me at all. It's great.
It's just what it should be, and I guess that's maybe to bring us on track here. Like, it seems to me like when I called this game a masterpiece, all the footage that I recorded that I did not include in the review was me kind of like almost like making excuses for things I knew the internet was going to say about it. I'm like, that's not what I want my review to be about at all. I didn't want to be making excuses about how long it was, or I didn't want to make excuses for the frame rate or anything like that. I just kind of approached it from like what it was. And it seems like that's a novel thing to do. Is just, this game is, for me, I don't even know what the clock was. Maybe it was 6 hours. Maybe it was 9 hours. I have no clue.
No, we couldn't tell. Like I mentioned to you because someone was asking me about it as well. And I'm just like, there was no way on the system clock to look.
Yeah, no achievements.
Yeah.
Everything was kind of like locked out. So, but to me, when I think about it, I'm like, did I want that to be much longer? Like, I don't think that I did.
No,
and
I don't think it needs to be. I felt it was the perfect length. There is something we'll talk about when we get to spoilers that I wish they might have added to the game.
Yeah, we could get there.
But beyond that, otherwise, it's so, like mentioned it earlier, it's so well paced. It doesn't need to be that long. In fact, it didn't overstay its welcome like a certain other game I'm currently playing called Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where it's too long. Where I don't, but I'm glad that the stuff that is too long and adds stuff length is all optional. So you know, it doesn't feel as padded out as some other games. But.
Well, and I wish we could celebrate that. And maybe through this discussion, like I can kind of articulate this better than I attempted with the solo review. You know, there's no UI, there's no menu system, there's no crafting, there's no quest log, there's no maps, there's like, and that's all sounds negative because I'm saying there's none of those things, but it's quite the opposite. Like, I feel like it takes a huge amount of discipline and design to be able to allow the player to just jump on in and experience, you know, X number of hours straight gameplay, thrilling narrative, and all these good things about it without getting anything in the way. You just strip it down and go, like, have at it. You know, you're doing some puzzles here. You're doing some, what I think is actually really cool combat, and really, you know, the overused word is visceral. I thought everything about this game was brutal, and it's because they were able to get everything out of the way. I don't want to be falling asleep in my recliner chair, sifting through menus and figuring out like what bundle of yarn to craft together with like some, like, I don't know, horseshoe glue. I have no clue.
Yep.
You know, there's none of that in this game. And I feel like when we talk about games that are 15, 20 hours, like they're that long because you're gathering materials and you're doing all this nonsense that they don't need to be in this game.
Or you're exploring like a large open space and there's like, you know, things that sidetrack you and stuff like that too. And that's not, you know, there is a little bit that with the collectibles in this, but beyond that, no, you're kind of
very minor.
It's very linear.
And that's not to say that like those games are great. I'm glad we have those games. This is not that, and that doesn't make this less.
Well, not only that too, you know, there is still exploration in this game, even though it is very linear. Like you can still go off the beaten path in a lot of areas, even when you've got, NPCs that are like, oh, come on ahead. We want to go do this next thing. I'm like, I want to kind of want to see what's over there first.
I was glad, it was, you know me, Ryan, like sometimes I need to be wrangled in a little bit. And I was glad when I did start to wander. I'm like, I know that I'm not going to get too far off track. Yeah. Because there's no map to tell me like which way to go or anything like that. So eventually I'm just going to find the right way. But yeah, it's just different. So I loved it for that.
No, and that actually also has to do with a lot of the visual design because of the way that it kind of reminds me a lot of way of the Metroid series because of the environmental storytelling that's on display here.
Yeah.
Where, first of all, every place that you visit in this game feels like a real location in like Iceland or something like that. And it feels like a lived in location as well. But it also, they use the environment to teach you how to play the game and how to get through the puzzles and things like that too. And that all comes down to how expertly crafted the world is in this game, but also too, because it's so visually striking, it encourages you to go off the beaten path and go look at all the other extra stuff that you want to go see as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I always felt like the sort of like rotation of there's going to be a combat sequence and there's going to be a puzzle and then you're going to kind of traverse to the next stage or you're going to interact with another character. Like, I just felt like, I think that's kind of what you mean by pacing. Yeah. Like just as it was kind of ramping things up and the narrative would climax to a certain point, you go like, holy crap. Like this is, I'm burning calories. Like I said in my review, like I felt obliterated by this game and both the brutality of the violence that you experience and also the emotional journey that you're on. And that is going to vary. What I'm finding by reading the internet today, it varies greatly as far as like how much of yourself you either see in this journey or you feel, you resonate with. Like, I think this is where some of the comments are like, I feel like some of us played a different game. Yeah.
Well, I think when we get to spoilers too, you're definitely going to find a big difference between, the way you looked at the story versus I did.
Oh, big time.
We're just very different people and we've had different experiences, right?
I'm scared to talk about one part, actually. I think, we'll get to that.
I kind of already were going with that too,
oof, dude, weeping in my chair. And you know me, it's very rare for me to go, can't wait to play this game because it'll just like tear my heart to shreds. But no, kind of. But
then you're also just like, well, I guess I got to go back and play with the other. I do want to play stuff back, and got to get all the collectibles. There's reasons to go back, Sean. There's reasons to play it 2 or 3 times, even, which is what I kind of want for this type of game too. Where if it's a short game like this, I like the fact that there's replayability. It's one of the reasons why I love Resident Evil 2 and 4 because those games, like the remakes of those, are like you can beat them in like 4 or 5 hours. Totally similar length to this game, Sean. But there's a ton of replayability with those games. In fact, I think a lot more replayability with those because 1, it's not as heavily story based, and 2, there's just a bunch of unlockable stuff to go get in those. For
sure.
Whereas this isn't made to be played through like 8 different times, like Resident Evil 2. It's meant to be played through maybe twice or 3 times even.
Ryan Turford, I want to get more to your thoughts on Hellblade 2, Senua Saga, or whatever order it is. I do want to bring in Nintendo dads were here a moment ago and asked, is this the win Xbox needs to have right now following the last few weeks of Xbox realignment? I don't know if you have any thoughts on the state of Xbox or if that even matters as far as like how you might enjoy this game.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I don't think that this changes anything with the state of Xbox because they are very much going in the Sega direction right now. They're going to multi-platform and that's fine. They've made that very abundantly clear that that's the direction they're going in and that's okay.
A better question actually maybe that I wanted to read that I lost for a second. I read that one instead. The real question I wanted to ask from the Nintendo dads was the industry seems to be very mixed on Hellblade. Why do you think that is, Ryan?
I think that an hour into playing this game, in my head, I uttered a phrase, which is, oh no, this game is definitely not going to be for everyone because I think it's just, the same thing that we see with a lot of walking simulator games, like the Edith Finch games or Gone Home or something like that, where like, people who are looking for like all the crafting stuff that you described, Sean, or all that extra stuff, or they're looking for like combat heavy games and stuff like that. That's not this game. Yeah. That is very much not what this game's thing is. It's trying to tell a great story with some combat and some puzzles thrown in for good measure. But the story is the first and foremost thing that it wants you to do, and the exploration. Like That's center stage with this game. And I think that resonates with, certain people, but it doesn't resonate with everyone. Like I saw some reviews, Sean, where they just in the blurb that's on Open Critics, they used and they called the game, a game in quotations when describing it. And I'm just like,
ouch,
y'all don't even know what you're doing here. Like, I don't know.
I agree.
Because this isn't the first time we've seen a game like this. Far from it. We've seen lots
the
of
first
games
one.
like that. Like the first one.
Didn't we play the first one? Like, I know I just played it, but it seemed to me like if you played the first one, you should know what to expect with this one.
Yeah. I mean, I will argue that I think there might be a little more puzzle solving and a little more combat maybe in the first game, but that's maybe I'm just misremembering that. But even so, you're absolutely 100% correct on that, Sean, because this game is definitely a sequel to the first one in every conceivable fashion.
Well, the one thing, for me, again, I played the first one, rolled right into the second one. I felt like the first one, the combat was neither one is really all that this is not Dark Souls. This is not anything crazy like that. But I couldn't get the parry down, the perfect parry for quite some time playing into the second one. It was so what I'm trying to say is the window to block was way more wide open in the first one, and it seemed to be a little bit more fine tuned. And I felt like I was fighting fake dress up monsters in the first one, you know, like scarecrows almost.
No, the enemies in this felt so much more realistic.
Yes.
Like you were fighting real people, which I think adds to the brutality.
It was the toplessness. It was the bare skin that you're stabbing into.
Of course. Well, and just the way that when the sword hits it, you see the gashes and stuff.
You do see the gashes.
Models. Yeah.
I wanted to get into more detail in the review, but that's kind of what I was getting at. Is you take a swipe at someone, it's that dude he's sliced open, he's on his way out, But
even I love all the finishers and stuff. That's
what it felt like. Cool. It felt like a Mortal Kombat kind of finisher.
Yeah.
Actually, just boom, stab in the head, stab through the kind of almost like the Brad Pitt Troy move into the shoulder. What was the wrestler's name that he got? It's just what a way to go. I don't really I'm glad we're having a conversation because I feel like it's a little bit just more it's more conversational. It's meant to be like that.
Of course.
And it's not meant to be a statement. And I want to give all that preface to say, I felt like The Last of Us did something similar when it ramped up its brutality from 1 to 2. And I want to kind of hesitate to bring up that game in relation to this one, but I just want to, have that discussion on the violence. It just seemed like it became a more central theme to this. Not that the first game wasn't violent at all. It's just then it was going after it on this,
Well, especially with the framing of the story, because as you mentioned in your review, Sean, this is a revenge story, through and through. So it makes sense to make the combat reflect that in a lot of ways, because it feels very much in line with where Senua's emotions and focus are, where she's trying to get through all these dudes to get to this one person that kind of ruined her life in a lot of ways.
Basically, completely. And I was worried. I mean, we're borderline on spoilers, but we won't get in there. But I think a lot of people were wondering how were they going to follow up the first game. It seemed to be a self-contained kind of thing. I felt like this made perfect sense. And once I realized that this is a revenge story, I thought, holy crap, this is exactly where it should be going. And for, I can't see in those joining us in the chat here as well, we will be getting to spoilers. We're in a spoiler-free moment right now. Still kind of getting Ryan Turford's thoughts on the games. And we also had some questions that were sent in from the community that we can get to that we didn't necessarily that I didn't get to in the review. I thought it'd be better for our conversation here. We kind of discussed this as well. I just want to acknowledge Quaggy's question said, is this the technical Series X showcase we were hoping for? And to me, it absolutely is. You mentioned reference discs, Criterion Collection. That really is it. You should be playing this on the best device or on the best screen that you can get your hands on. Great set of headphones, and it's going to be wonderful.
Although I'm going to give a shout out, Sean, with headphones specifically. I played this entirely using the Xbox wireless headset, and it did a fantastic job with the audio. I thought it sounded incredible. And those headphones support Dolby Atmos as well as 3D audio spaces as well. Of course, we don't have Dolby Atmos for games, only for movies, but it does support the 3D sound that this game supports. So you definitely not only want a good headset, but you also want a good headset with 3D audio specifically, because they really play with the space, like where the voices are, in a really interesting way, where I think if you have like a cheaper pair of headphones, it's not going to do the job. Like if you have like your iPhone headphones, or, as an example, like that's not going to do the job, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing that I'm seeing a lot of people talk about is like, oh, I watched a video on YouTube, or I watched a streamer do it. And it's like, not quite the same. I feel like that is the part that makes it a video game. You know, like the difference between experiencing it yourself versus watching somebody else do it. Like if you're expecting it to land by watching somebody else play it, it's not going to, number one. And number two, like that answers the question, is this a video game, bro?
Well,
like
it's definitely not a movie.
To be able to.
Right? Like that, like some people in their reviews were calling it a movie, Sean, but it's definitely not a movie. There's a lot of interaction. And in fact, you know, when you're in the fight scenes, as an example, like you feel like you're there because you're interacting with the game. Like in a way that I wouldn't have felt that way if I was just watching the fight scene in a cutscene, as an example.
Well, and one of the things, Sarthina in the chat mentions the whispers. One thing I thought that was really interesting as an evolution for Senua was, felt like in the first game, the voices are really there to demonize you and to, you know, crawl with doubt and second guessing. And it really was a like a combative type of relationship between Senua and these voices that she's hearing, where there's more of an acceptance. Like, I guess this is part of her, and that's sort of like the resolution that sort of happens at the end of the first game, which carries over into this one. And specifically when it comes to combat, you know, they kind of help you a little bit, like dodge or get out of the way and focus, or even encourage you while you get a couple good hits, like, oh, you're faster, you're stronger, you're a much better warrior than they are. And I just thought that was a really interesting next step for that, what is a critical element to the game, which shows up from a technical element, like when you're wearing headphones, into like, it makes sense for the character to be experiencing in this way, and an evolution from the first game. These are the reasons, Ryan, that I am so high on this game, because it seems like they, like I said in the review, like they cared, they gave a shit, and they really they went there, man. So
no, for sure. Like with the whispers, Sean, like you can definitely tell, like they represent her confidence, because she's a confident character in this game.
Sometimes,
she's not, like, for the most part, like there are obviously moments of doubt, but she is definitely a much more confident character than the first game, which
I loved. And that's where I say something as bold as like she's become one of the best video game characters of all time.
Yeah. I don't know if I agree with that, because I'd really have to think about who I consider the best video game characters of all time, but definitely one of the better modern video game characters. I'll definitely give you that one.
So not as good as Crash Bandicoot, Ryan.
No, I mean, what about Spyro the Dragon, Sean? He's got quite the lineage.
I mean, sadly, I just don't know if like that list is all that long.
Oh no, I mean,
like the best video game characters of all time.
But I'm just saying I'm not quick to just throw that on there, because that list is sacred, Sean. Sacred. I don't want to mess with it too much without
better than
taking
Doom
some
Guy?
serious.
We could do a tier list maybe sometime.
I feel like we should do that someday.
I think she's up there, man. I think she kicks ass. So
no, I definitely agree with you. She's definitely up high on the list. I don't know where she is on the list though.
Tim Paullin asked a question, and actually Daryl also asked a question very similar to this as well. We'll tackle them both at the same time. First, Tim Paullin says, "Can I beat it by Friday?" The answer is yes, you can. You can probably. I think Kevin.
You can beat it in one day. Kevin and I both did the same thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Tim Paullin asks, "How are the puzzles? How does it feel compared to Sacrifice? Is that enough questions?" Daryl also asks, "How are the puzzles? Do they make some sense when working them out?" I remember doing some of them in the original. It didn't feel like I was accomplishing anything. I was just going in and out of trenches and doing something. Don't even recall what. I guess to eventually open a door. I think I gave up and never really went back. Yeah. What do you think of the puzzles in this game, Ryan, in relation to the first game and just overall?
So first off, I will say, and just this is one of my minor nitpicks with the game. First of all, I like the stories and how they relate, the puzzles and the way that they relate to the story, because they perfectly make sense in this world for the puzzles to be these types of puzzles, because Senua is trying to find her way through the world. And then they actually, mention that many times through the story. And the puzzles are kind of like a reflection of that in a lot of ways, where, she's finding a way that no other person can, because she sees the world differently. So I like that about the puzzles. At the same time, I felt in this game, the same way I kind of felt about the puzzles in the first game, where they were definitely the weakest part of the game for me personally, where I thought they were fine. They were definitely serviceable. They weren't frustrating. I never really got lost with the puzzles or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I also wasn't just like excited to get to the next puzzle or anything like that, if that makes sense.
Well, and I guess that's maybe where, like, I almost didn't even bring them up in my review. Like, I'm not a puzzle guy. I'm not like, oh my gosh, this puzzle is so fun. Like that. I don't think I've ever said that. So kind of what you mentioned, you know, it never really halted my progression into the game. So I was okay with it. You know, it gave me something to overcome, and that was it.
Especially this time around, since, you know, we were playing the game early. So like we didn't have guides to go back to. So, but I never felt like I needed to.
Yeah.
Right? Like Hellblade 1, I can definitely tell you, when I played that game for the first time, there were a couple puzzles where I was like, well, I need to look this up because I'm missing something in the environment.
Right.
Because I think the puzzles in the first game are much more about finding the symbols in the environment. And sometimes you just miss like the visual cue of where that is. Where I felt like the times that they did that in this game, where you have to find the symbols in the environment, the game was much better about guiding you to where those were.
Definitely. I felt like it was always going to be a given. I was going to find that fairly well. Like, again, it didn't allow you to, if you were doing one of those find the symbol kind of question or kind of puzzles, the environment that you had to wander around in wasn't all that big. Like you couldn't be in the wrong place for too long. And also, you know, it has like the floating symbols that show up and you know that you're kind of in the right place. So yeah, I think that's kind of what you mean by guiding you.
Yeah. Whereas in the first game, I just felt like they had a tougher time kind of conveying that to the player. Whereas this one, it was much more improved with that aspect, I think.
Well, and that's kind of like, I felt like that kind of speaks to what we got with this second game was more confidence as far as like, what is it? You know, like I think because the concept had been developed and the technical aspects had been evolved, storyline is evolved. I felt like that took more of the forefront than the puzzles. But I feel like if that wasn't, then maybe the identity of the first game was more of like a puzzle combat kind of thing with some storytelling and character development. Whereas this is like, you kind of leave the puzzles behind. It just didn't seem nearly as core an element to the game. And that's, again, it's just not, I don't think it's a knock to it at all. I thought the combat was
a focus this time around, which is
more
good.
on, like they kind of like, if there's like a slider, you know, they slid it more towards combat. And that's not to say this is the most complex sword fighting game you've ever played, but it kind of leans more towards your experience in combat versus puzzles.
So Sean, I will ask, I didn't see your review because I specifically made sure not to watch it on purpose because I didn't want to, cloud some thoughts, because even though we had talked about it ahead of times, but I want to know with the combat specifically, did you notice first of all that the combat difficulty by default is set to dynamic difficulty?
Yeah.
And like, did you notice that the game was getting easier or harder if you were struggling or were on top of things? Well, like, I will tell you, as someone who is really good at doing the parries, even early on, the parry window I noticed very quickly shrunk very, very quickly because I noticed I could tell it was bumping me up to hard difficulty because of how good I was doing on the parrying. And likewise, the one or two times I struggled in combat, I also noticed the game pull back a little bit where I was taking less damage if I was getting hit. And the parry window was like much bigger. Like I could definitely tell there was a difference, which is awesome. I loved that they did that because I feel like we don't get enough games where dynamic difficulty is an option. And I wish it was a thing in more games.
I don't think I've really ever, like, where do you ever really see? I feel like it reminds me of what do they call it? Like the active director in the Left 4 Dead games?
Exactly that. Yeah, it's exactly like that in a lot of ways. And I believe it or not, I think I see this a lot more in sports games like Top Spin.
Oh yeah.
Which I've been playing a lot of as kind of my palate cleansing game. It has dynamic difficulty options where you can have it where the better you're doing at tennis, the better the opponent gets, or it'll ease up on you if it's, getting too difficult.
Yeah. So, well, and that all comes from such a focus experience. Like you can't do that in a wide open space. So, I mean, like the puzzles are there, I guess, like whether or not it's a huge hit on your experience with the game, like is kind of related to how heavy you want good puzzles, but they, for better or for worse, I just don't think that they're really an identifying like kind of element to this game. They give you a reason to kind of explore and experience the landscape and the places that you're in. But yeah, otherwise, they're there to provide a little bit of resistance so that you can then accomplish something to then move forward. So if I'm getting like really kind of anal about it, you know, like could there have been a little bit more of a challenge on that front so that you struggled in a way like alongside Senua? Like maybe there's something a little bit more meta that they could have leaned into there, because the puzzles and the combat don't really do that. But at the same time, Ryan, like it got they're out of the way so that I could experience like what she goes through much more directly. I didn't need an analogy or a comparison, an analog to feel like, wow, she's going through some real crap times right now. It's like,
yeah,
that is obvious. There wasn't anything that I needed to feel as a player if I'm just watching and experiencing this game and listening to the voices running through her head. Felt like that was enough for me. I didn't need more. Didn't need Dark Souls on top of this.
No, absolutely. In fact, the combat and the puzzles are very much a supplement to the story and the storytelling, not the focus of the game. Because again, it is going more for that walking simulator style game with puzzles and combat added into it, as opposed to a combat game that happens to have puzzles.
Totally. Yeah. Those are all the questions that we got from the community. Is there anything else you wanted to cover in the spoiler-free kind of moment here, Ryan, before we jump into the story beats?
So before that, I want to kind of give like an overall, because you obviously gave kind of your overall ranking and recommendation and stuff like that to people, and I would just wanted to have a quick chance to do that. Since I wasn't part of the review process, so especially too before we go into spoilers. So first of all, I think this is the perfect type of game for Game Pass in so many ways, where this is the type of experience where I think, as I mentioned earlier, and we've seen this with the reviews, this gameplay style and this style of storytelling is not going to appeal to everyone, and that's okay. That's how you can definitely tell that this is a masterclass in art, because, same with a great painting or a great film, a masterpiece film, not everyone's going to agree with it. Not everyone's going to like it, and that's okay. It's totally fine. That's what's great about art, is that we all feel about them differently. So this is the perfect game where if you boot it up for an hour, you'll be able to tell if you like it right away or not. And then, at least give it a chance. I would implore people listening or watching this, if we haven't somehow sold you on this game already, please at least give this game a chance and play it for yourself. Especially if you got Game Pass, it's right there. What are you doing? You may as well. And this is also the type of game too, where it's like, if you're maybe eyeing Game Pass, if you maybe want to sign up for a month and try some games out, like this is the perfect reason to do that. Especially because you can play through it in an afternoon. It's not a huge time investment. And overall, I think it's a fantastic game. And I just want more people to play this game, especially after Hellblade 1, Sean, because it really, for the longest time, like I didn't really know anyone else who'd played that game, because I felt like just a lot of people really missed it, whether it was when it was exclusive to PlayStation or when it came to Xbox. I definitely think more people played it when it came to Game Pass, but a lot of people really, I think, missed out on the first game, which is too bad, because that game is really good. But I just want to encourage people to at least, whether you see the positive or negative reviews, just give it a chance and see what you think about the game yourself. Is more what I want to encourage people to do, because I think, rather than judging the game forthright, just give it a chance. You never know. You might like this one. So, I
mean, now you got them all. Speaking of Game Pass, you can play 1 and 2 together as one full experience, one might say, Ryan.
Right there. In fact, I'm tempted, Sean, if this game ever leaves Xbox, I'm tempted to just go get the Platinum Trophy too, on top of the 1,000 gamer score, because that's how much I like this game, Sean.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful game. It's a beautiful experience. I felt like Ninja Theory really they really put a lot of effort into this thing. They did their research, they did their homework on a variety of fronts. I felt like the way that they treated the, I want to say like source material, it's not what I mean necessarily. It's not like it was based on a comic. It's like the themes of mental illness and psychosis. I just felt like it was treated so maturely, and not as a trope, not as a plot device necessarily, even though it is there to drive the story forward. I just feel like this, when I use words like masterpiece, it kind of like is referencing this element of it as well. This raises the bar. If you're going to be leveraging something this serious, this isn't something to be taken lightly and to be used lightly. and they did their homework on it. And I think that is to be as commended as the homework that was done to make it the technical masterpiece that it is. The understanding of psychosis and how this can be sort of, again, like I don't even like using the word, but like leveraged into a gameplay mechanic, kind of key component to a game. How the hell did they do that?
Yeah.
You know, like I just don't think people kind of like really think about how inappropriately that could have been done, how inappropriately that could have been handled. This could have gone wrong 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
And it's not what anybody is talking about at all, because they did it so wonderfully well. It didn't seem like they were trying to like go out of their way to tell a story for those who are, you know, suffering through psychosis. Although I'm sure those who are look at this and appreciate it. There's some great materials that Ninja Theory had put out starring and featuring people. I shouldn't say starring, but featuring people who go through this. I highly encourage people to go watch that, because it just gives you a little bit more context to understand how this game was made. So yeah, there's a lot more than just the game that itself, and that's the lens that I really experienced this game through, and it touched me, man. It really did.
No, that's really well said, and that was a big feeling I had after playing the first game, where they really handled it very well, and then in this game too. And also, I liked too, like that. Like I felt like the psychosis specifically was more of a thing in the story. Like it played a bigger part in the story in the first game.
Yeah.
Whereas I felt like in this game, it plays a little bit of a part, but it's very much just Senua is just a character that is, you know, suffering from psychosis. She's not, but it doesn't define her as a person, or it's not the main theme of the story or the main.
Yeah. She had more to contend with. I think she had. Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like it's, I think what makes it done so well is that she feels like a real person in that way, where it's,
yes,
you know, that's not defining who she is. And she's kind of come to terms with it after the first game, which makes thematic sense with the way that the story works, which is something that I almost hope we see more of from other developers. Like, I think it would be really interesting, because people ask for diversity all the time, or to have characters feel like real people. Like, what if we had more characters that were like this, where, you know, these mental diseases and disorders were really well researched and implemented in some video games? Because these are the type of things that, you know, we as people deal with every day. And obviously, you know, sometimes we want to, you know, play games to maybe escape from reality a little bit. But I also, if we want, you know, games to feel like movies or feel like a serious art form, then I think we should be able to depict people with these and in a tasteful and respectful way. Because like, I want to see more of this type of thing, because it really gave me, and I'm sure you feel the same way, Sean, like it gave me much more of a window into, you know, what someone with psychosis might have to deal with on an everyday basis, and like how I look at that differently now. Like I look at those people differently now, and understand them. At least I feel like I understand that a little bit more now.
I feel like, and I'd love to do a little bit more research into this piece, but from my completely ignorant and uneducated brain, it seemed to me like this was broadening beyond just psychosis, if that's fair to say. Like it seemed to me like this was touching in like anxiety as well. Maybe those are related. Maybe those are, and I'm sure they're not one and the same, but I'm sure they are sort of correlated to a certain extent. Because the spiraling that happens, like, oh, if this happens, then I can't do this. And if that happens, then that, like, and the sort of like nihilism that kind of comes along with that is like there's no point to any of this. And, you know, fate is what it is. There's no changing the future. There's cycles that are going to repeat. Those are the themes that show up here over and over again. And like, you know, the sins of our father, that came from the first game and roll right into this game and actually bookend this game from the beginning into the end. I just, there's nothing 5 out of 10 about this. Like, I'm sorry, this is meant to be like a review discussion for like our thoughts, but like, there's nothing 5 out of 10 about it. I just don't understand it. Oh my God.
No, I think from a critical level, you are 100% right. I can definitely, though, understand why a person might feel like it's a personal 5 out of 10 for me, as an example. But critically, I agree with you. If you're looking at it from a critical lens, Sean, I don't understand how that
Well, and that's going to be any game then. You could take literally any game and go like, for someone, that's a 0 out of 10. Like that's,
exactly.
I hope that's
but
clear.
again, there's a way
that.
to evaluate games critically and take your own personality out.
Yeah.
Of it, right.
Yeah. So, dude, like I appreciate it for so many things that it brings to the table. I don't know like other than the first game that I played immediately before it, I'm not sure that I've had an experience quite like this. In a very, very long time. I haven't felt this connected to story and a set of characters. In the narrative arc, I thought that, this game would be one thing we haven't really touched on together here is we've moved on from the Norse gods as being sort of like the main theme. We're not going to Helheim. Yeah. We're still in this world. We're still, it's still referencing the past where she goes to hell and she's now in Midgard, the world of men. Like this still within the same sort of mythos.
No, and some of the big enemies are very much based on that as well. Like
the big enemies, yeah. Is that spoiler? I feel like it was in.
Well, they already kind of spoiled it during the Game Awards. If you watched the Game Awards gameplay showcase, they spoiled what the enemies.
A pretty good chunk of what you play. Well, this game.
Sean, how do you really show this game without spoiling a chunk of the game?
Dude, tell me about it. I picked maybe like 2 minutes of game. I have almost the entire game recorded, and I think I've featured maybe 3 minutes of like the actual gameplay footage because I didn't want to ruin anything for anyone. Which then as I was putting it together, I'm thinking this is just going to make the game look boring and feed into the trolls out there who are like, see, there's nothing here. I'm like, I don't want to show you everything because there's so much that needs to be experienced for yourself.
No, for sure. And again, it's just like, it's when you're trying to, it's the tricky thing of like, if we were doing movie reviews on the channel, Sean, like how much of a specific movie would you even want to show in your review anyways? Like
totally. Yeah. Whatever the trailer shows.
Yeah. Like I have to give a shout out to people who actually make movie trailers, Sean, because like, first of all, you have to make it interesting enough to sell people, but also not spoil stuff for people.
Keep all the main parts out. It's hard to do
for like something that's an hour and a half.
No doubt. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why you get like, where's the girl? And all that.
That is kind of how that works. That's how that works.
Yeah, flying words coming at the screen.
Good.
Ryan, anything other critically before we close the door on the spoiler-free chapter of this conversation?
I think we're ready, Sean. I think we're ready for spoilers. Now, Sean, if you could do me a favor, since you have control of StreamYard, if you could put up a banner that just says spoilers.
I don't think I can. Can I?
Yeah, you just go to the banner section and make a new banner.
Oh, I see. Oh, the banners. Yes.
Because that way, it just forewarns anyone who comes on in here with a visual warning saying there's spoilers now. That we're transitioning into spoilers. But Sean, that's perfect. Yeah.
Spoilers are happening. Yes.
Spoilers are happening. So to give, people like a minute or two to bow. First of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who came out to the Twitch stream tonight, who came to hang out with us. I totally understand if y'all don't want to hang around and hear us spoil this game, but I hope
the day it came out.
Yeah, the day it came out.
But some people are there, man. Some people are there with us, and this is live on Twitch. This will exist also on YouTube as well. And if you want an audio feed, we'll check it out on the Xbox Drive audio feed as well as Patreon. We'll put it on the feed there too, because I know a lot of our patrons really only listen to that as a singular Carpool Gaming feed. There's nothing visual that anybody's missing out on this conversation at all. We're not displaying any gameplay footage or anything. It's just a chat between Brian and I tonight.
We're just hanging out. We're again, this feels very much old school Xbox Drive, Sean. I missed this.
Hell yeah. Yeah, this is nice. Yeah. Okay. So 3, 2, 1. No. It's like you just jump to the end.
Just do the countdown. All right. Spoilers are now in effect.
Okay. I feel like, now that we're kind of in the safe territory, there is definitely some beats that I would like to discuss, but even as we were just like tiptoeing to the edge of the diving board, thinking like there's not really like a main thing of like, I can't believe Senua is actually Dillian in a mask or anything like that. Like,
I will say that kind of moment though happened for me towards the end of the game when I came to the realization when Senua did, oh my God, the last giant isn't actually a giant. It's this king who is just pretending a giant exists just so he can control his people in his country. I'm like, what the heck is going on here?
I'm glad we jumped to the end. And I'm really glad that was the ending, because I felt like this game, maybe we should have talked about this before too. I feel like they nailed the ending, which is so rare for video games to do.
Yeah, I loved the ending, but I will also say I wish there was more to the ending than what we got. Like I don't get me wrong. I like when you know people are bold enough to have like an very open ending to things. But I wish this is one of those cases where I kind of wanted to know more after the credits were over. Like even just a quick, like even a quick 10-minute, like
here's what happened,
wrapping things up kind of thing.
Oh,
right? Interesting. Like that's kind of how I felt.
I was more like bracing for a super cheesy, like even a third giant. Like I really didn't want to do another, like a third giant. I felt like the change up was interesting from a narrative perspective, but also from a gameplay perspective. I didn't want to like. I did the first giant and figured like, okay, that actually, I thought the game might be ending at that point after the first one.
Yeah.
Thought maybe like that was enough for me. I needed to step away from the game after the first one. And then the second one happened. I'm like, oh man, like we're doing things in threes. This is very video gamey kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then it changes it up at the end. So I appreciated it for that. And I just wanted to beat the shit out of this guy. I just wanted to torture. I wanted to cut off each of his toes individually.
Fight scene at the end with him where you're getting up against the ropes and like the people are crowding around and they're putting it back. Like it was so satisfying.
Yes. Yeah. Like, and the thing is, you've been spending almost your entire time not knowing that this guy is here or even exists. And somehow you're thrust into this situation and you hate his guts. Yeah. He's disgusting.
Well, he's the person that Senua has been chasing and wanting revenge from this whole time.
Yeah.
And he just happens to also be like the final quote unquote giant, the final character.
I mean, that ties in so perfectly. And his son, and I hate it because I'm not going to be able to say characters' names correctly.
I knew that. I figured that I was going to have the same problem coming into like, I don't remember any of these names because they're all long Norse names.
Yeah, they're pretty tricky. So King Man
and his son.
Yeah. He was a good battle to have, but the way that, you know, you're able to kind of sway his son through his journey, like you're ready to kill him.
Yeah.
And this is kind of what I was alluding to at the book ending of it. And I didn't realize this until I replayed the first chapter or two after it, was when after Senua's washed up on shore, she's wandering around and then she meets up with the guy who they call Master. This is the slave master who's bringing them all over. Turns out to be a pretty key person in the journey here. They have a really key fight. It's probably the first big moment of the game. And you end up getting the upper hand. You're on top of them, and then you're beating them down. And grab a rock, and Senua's holding this giant rock over her head, ready to smash his brains in. And she pauses, and she, for whatever, realizes that there's a better path. Now, there's more to it, but skipping to the end, you're in the exact same situation. And I think for different reasons, she decides not to kill him. She was realizing how that's going to perpetuate this cycle of violence.
Yeah.
So very Looper-esque. You know, not quite as final as the movie Looper.
Right.
But I love the way that happened.
Yeah.
Between those two characters.
Especially too with the way the voices kind of convey her inner struggle as well with how, whether or not she should actually murder this dude.
Yeah.
I love that as well. Like and that's a great, you know, correlation that you brought up there with Sean with that, the almost like bookending how you.
Well, they foreshadowed it a little bit. Like, you know, if you kill him, another one will surely rise up and take his place, which is very likely. It's very true.
No, exactly. And especially given the time period, like, of course, people are going to buy a story about, you know, giants and stuff like that too, because, you know, that's just how people were back then. They just believe what you tell them. Right. So, but what was really interesting about that, Sean, you know, speaking of,
hang on a second. Were the other giants not real? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Oh, no. I think they were real, but you never know though, because like, it's hard to believe everything Senua sees because of the way she sees the world.
That's true.
So that's why I think, like, don't get me wrong, I think the other giants are real, but you never know. There's a tinge of doubt. It's almost like when I got to the end of watching Total Recall for the first time, Sean, where I'm like, oh, maybe, you know, Arnold has been dreaming this whole time and is just sitting in recall. Yeah. Like it's kind of the same thing. And I felt the same way at the end of Hellblade 1, where did this all actually happen, or is this actually just playing out in Senua's head?
Yeah.
Especially too, because of the fact that the giants in each of the zones are based off a real life person. I think the only one that I think is probably real, or the one that kind of leads to them being real, is the first one. because there's reasons why that kind of makes sense as to why that first giant is probably not like a real life person that you're fighting. It's probably a giant or some mythological creature.
It seemed like that was the same case with the second giant. So the first one was the mother,
right?
Which completely destroyed me.
Oh, I imagined. Like I teared up knowing that how devastated you probably were by.
It was awful. That was I thought we had been through enough by that point.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's a story of I can't remember why she actually because the world she didn't want this baby to be raised in this world, so she trusted the baby to these others, and
she trusted them to the hidden ones, which aren't real people, like they're spirits.
So obviously the baby dies.
Yeah.
And is as if that isn't devastating enough, Senua discovers this little like baby skeleton, like this. I'm like, this is what I mean. Like, it's not for the faint of heart. They really go there. We're talking about like deceased infants in this. And again, it seemed like that almost seems even just saying it. How do you handle a topic like that tastefully? Mm-hmm. In a way where I didn't feel like it was just done to rip my heart to shreds. It seemed like it fit within this world. And if we're talking about people becoming giants, becoming monstrous because of awful things that they've done or regret or things like that, where you have good intentions, you make a decision and you're forever changed. That's the theme of this game. Mm-hmm. And in this world, it makes sense that would transform you into a hideous, giant that is just full of rage, doing even more awful things, but not really all that happy, like just suffering forever. Yeah,
they're not enjoying their existence of being giants.
And it's the same miserable. That we explored in the first game, where you're going through hell and you've got these people living for the rest of eternity in hell, in suffering. This is a different kind of look at that theme. And then the way to, battle these monsters is through compassion and understanding. This is why, like, how do I talk about that in a spoiler-free?
You can't. It's like trying to talk about the themes in Gone Home, but not trying to spoil the story. Like, you can't do that.
You can't. Like, that's what makes this game special. And this is why I'm like, dude, what are we talking about puzzles for? Like, we're sitting here talking about puzzles and a 5-hour, 6-hour, 7-hour game, when meanwhile, the meat on the bone here are these giants that are terrorizing the land, that force these Northmen to wander across the sea to pick up these sacrifices from another village to bring them back just to keep them safe. They're so deeply rooted in fear that they're going to do these heinous acts that impact Senua in the first game and send her off into that journey. Then they bring her back into this one where they see the root of this evil, and you go into the heart of it, into the core, to try to dismantle it. Well, really, you're actually going to seek your revenge.
Right.
And then you discover that as Senua, you discover this is not the path. And what better way to start to break that down than to throw such an extreme situation at Senua and at the player, that this mother had to make this awful choice and live with the repercussions. And then it shows it to you.
Yeah.
And only a character, I think, like Senua could pick up that baby,
right,
and offer it back and make that connection back to the giant, and it all goes away.
Mm-hmm. It's powerful.
I'm at my limit. I'm at my limit even thinking about it. This is why people just need to play it. At least get back to that part, get to that point.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, did that, I have a personal experience sort of like within that space that is recent, and it's haunting me. So that's me. That's, that's going to resonate with me. It's going to shake my bones in a different way. So I'm curious if that was a moment for you, if it was something else that you were like, the next giant is not quite as.
I was going to say that was actually the one moment that really got me emotionally in this game, was just seeing the baby there for the first time and the realization, like, because don't get me wrong, I've seen the topic of dead infants tackled in anime before. That's
I was thinking this is very anime. Yeah.
Like I've seen that in anime before. Like there was one I was watching recently that had that in it. And so it was very, it struck a huge chord with me to see that in a game, because that's something I never expected to see when playing this game. Like I couldn't believe that they went there, but I also respected that they did it respectfully, and it felt real. Because again, like when you really think about that era, like think about like the
totally.
1600s or whatever, like you hear stories about people leaving their babies on like churches' doorsteps and stuff all the time. Like 9 times, like that, those are the lucky cases where the kid luckily gets picked up, like where there's probably so many more undocumented cases like this of, well, I just left my kid at the cave and I'm sure someone will take care of them, and no one does. Like it felt real. Like it felt like it was something rooted in reality and well researched. And I have to give them props, because if you're going to go there with something like this, I'm glad that they did it respectfully and tastefully.
Didn't feel cheap. It felt earned. Yeah, it felt as part of the world. Like everything you said, and there was no going back from this moment for me. Yeah. My mind was made up of like what I thought of the game, how it was there to impact me, and luckily it didn't dwell on that moment. Like I said, they could have rolled credits there. I would have been like, okay, wow, that was an experience. But then you kind of like roll right into the next giant, which was really interesting. I wasn't sure how they were gonna reconcile this one, where Viking lady who was in Senua, her dad was leading their tribe, and he had been betrayed. You kind of like peeling back the layers with her as she's starting to kind of like open up a little bit more and a little bit more. You realize that her dad had entrusted this guy who was in a tough spot. He was in a bit of a bind, and he like really in between like a rock and a hard place, and made a deal that eventually like got her father killed. Yeah. And so kind of understanding that story, I was like, I don't know that I think this guy should be, I don't know. Like, I'm not saying forgiven. He shouldn't be forgiven, but it's like, it didn't have like the same, I didn't have the obvious same.
No, you didn't feel for him in the same way as the mother.
Totally. So I don't know if like how that, because I kind of like
that hit me this giant in particular hit me in a very personal way, Sean, because of, a story that happened, with my mom when she went to prison. The main reason why she went to prison was she trusted someone in a very similar situation as this guy did. It really brought up a lot of, memories of when I was a kid and when all that happened. So I definitely felt for her father in that moment, where that person, that giant, to me, just did not, like, I was just like, I was ready to take him down at that
right
point. Like, I felt that in a way that I probably wouldn't have if I didn't have my personal life experiences that played
I mean, I didn't have it. I felt kind of the same way as you. I was like, how are they going to make this feel okay to, give this guy his peace? Yeah. Which is ultimately like how you're taking these giants down. You're not actually.
Although I did feel like I sympathized a little bit when you're actually doing the encounter with him, and he's just pleading and begging for you to end it for him. Like he just wants to be, set free and not be, this monster anymore. So I felt him in that moment a little bit, where I was like, okay, well maybe we don't need to just, maybe murdering him, I guess, will help. Like, I feel like, stopping him will definitely help him, be free, and put his soul at ease, I think.
Ultimately where I landed on that one too, because I was really doing some like mental work on this one, is that sometimes where we find ourselves in situations where we actually don't have a good choice to make. Like there is no clear right answer or wrong answer. And it felt like kind of no matter what was going to happen, he was going to suffer, regardless of which way, whether he gave up the leader or he took his other choice. Like it was not going to be a good path for him. And he had to choose what he felt was the lesser of two evils. And I think that's ultimately where kind of Senua gets to with him, is understanding, especially with everything that she has been through, that sometimes you just kind of have to make the less crappy option, the move forward. And in this case, it ended up kind of damning him to the ocean. And turning him into the giant that he is, and ultimately causing even more death and destruction upon this village. But it created this antagonism between him and those villagers that like would just perpetuate the whole thing. And that's the theme of the damn game, man. It's just violence begets violence in this. And everybody's trying to get a one up on the other, and nobody ever wins. Everybody always loses. It's a vicious cycle. And yeah, like there's so much brutality in all of that. There's so much it's negativity.
I was going to say, these are all the same themes from The Last of Us Part 2, but somehow this does it like way better.
I mean, like I said, I was kind of dancing around before. This is, oh man, you're going to make me do it. I think this is a way better revenge story. I think it's a tighter narrative, tighter gameplay experience. I felt like it's way more intelligent writing. Yep. I won't go after performances because I think performances are
I think the performances in Last of Us Part 2 are really good.
Very good. Yeah. People misunderstand why I dislike The Last of Us Part 2, but I definitely saw similarities in these games, even though on the surface there's none to be found other than their technical masterpieces.
No, I think thematically there's a lot of similarities.
Big time. Yeah. And revenge doesn't really pay off at all. So, like you kind of go from, I'm going to chase down this master slaver guy in this strange land that I'm in, to, oh my God, there's these giants that are ravaging this. So what's this all about?
Yeah.
You solve these giants and they're, you become sort of like a hero to this land because of the compassion that you've learned through the struggle of psychosis, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, this is all packed within a 5 or 9 hour experience. Like, again, I just want to reiterate, that's why the time conversation is so stupid to me, because when do you ever get that much story packed into a 20-hour game?
Right. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why, like, even like when you look at video game adaptations, when you look at movies, like, of course they can't tell a full game story in 2 hours in most cases. They just can't. So yeah, the way like this in a lot of ways, I made the comparison earlier, but I feel like this felt like I was watching like a short TV show or something like that. In a lot of ways. As far as the pacing of the story is concerned, anyways, or watching an anime, because anime is very much structured the way that the story in this is structured.
It just seemed to introduce, explore, and satisfy so many extreme themes in a short experience. That's why I was so glad to play it. The story of vengeance is what gets you on, like, into, like, on the map. That's kind of what gets things going here. The idea that is reflected from the first game, where you will be damned by your father's sins, by the monstrosity of your father, for Senua. And then she finds herself in this land chasing down this master slaver who's, only the way he is because he's listened to his father, I think is masterful writing and masterful storytelling. All of the reconciliation that has to happen with these giants, all the trust issues that people have with each other and coming into contact with one another, listening and hearing to the dead and their suffering and letting people down. And man, like the thing that got me, I talked about it in the review that you haven't seen just yet, but the thing that got me is just as I'm feeling like Sen was like, man, I've really conquered my demons. I went to hell and I satisfied that whole storyline and I got all the way over here. And
I killed a god.
Survived. Yeah, I killed a god. I put the shards together and I killed hell. Like I mastered that.
I love that she mentions that too. She's just like, oh, I killed a god. It's fine.
Dude, yeah, like that's what I mean. She's a badass, dude. She's done amazing things. And even still, doubt can creep in. Every once in a while, the shadow comes in and it clouds her judgment and she starts to spiral. And this is where my experience comes in. I've ran marathons. Doing this is difficult. We've all done very hard things and it's going to be different for every person. And yet, just one little slip, even talking about this game is an example of this, where I'm really happy with the review. And then all of a sudden the other reviews come out. I'm like, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe all those thoughts, I'm not just saying it for the show. Like that's really what goes through my head. You can have great things happen and then just some little slip and back into the darkness, dude.
Yeah.
And it shows that to you in such an interesting way and such a relatable way, even though everything's so extreme and out there and things you've never seen or actually experienced.
Right. But yeah, because you can also relate to that, but not only her fears, because her fears are on display as well. Like when you're traveling through the caves to go visit with the hidden folk, like her fear of the dark comes back in a big way, like it did from the first game as well. Like when you lose your torch and stuff, like it really, again, just makes you feel like Senua is a real person that could exist in our world. And that's what I loved about her as a character and how she's designed.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to bring up too, because there's so much focus on puzzles, and I just felt like, there's a couple of the puzzles from the first one, but it just seemed like more scenarios to conquer there's just not really a word for
no, and again, I think it's there to, continue with the themes of Senua needs to find her own way in the world.
Right.
And her getting through these places that no one else can go because she sees the world differently.
What did you think happened with the sword that she puts into the hole?
You didn't catch on what's happening there?
Well, it's her.
Yeah, of course.
There's some sort of like time loop. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause it's not even just that moment, but all the other times you see kind of the spirit going around and
it's her
lighting the torch. It's her every single time. Cause it's I think it's a whole, Norse mythology thing with ghosts and stuff like that. That's what my read on it was.
Yeah. Like I understood that it was her.
I don't think it has to do
why.
I don't think it has like a specific theming reason as to why that is, or at least there's not one that I picked up on.
I really loved, the generosity, the trust, there's something about her hearing a voice in this hole saying, I need your sword. I need your sword. Like, give it to me. Like they're running out of time and it's all she has. And she still gives it to her.
Yeah.
And then she's almost like rewarding herself later on when later she finds herself being the voice calling up, please send me the sword. And it's like, well, thank God you put the sword in the hole because you needed it.
But what even is the bigger brain tease is, well, you know what? What if she didn't put the sword in there in the first place?
Dude, then she's not there to call for it.
She would have just had it the whole time. Yeah. So it's just like,
I don't like that. I don't like that. Oh yeah, nosebleed.
You're thinking about why it is, how
there
everything
went
exists.
cross-eyed.
Yeah. There's a lot of moments like that when you're entering through that area, which is just interesting. Because again, it wasn't until that moment that it clicked with me. That's like, oh, this spirit is actually Senua who's traveling around and stuff like that. So that was actually a cool reveal though. I liked that they had that there, but it's also just again another way to show off that one of her great personality traits. She's just a very compassionate person, and she will put other people's needs ahead of hers if they are in front of her and need help. Likewise, she didn't have to fight any of those giants. She could have just continued on to the slaver city if she wanted to. It's not like the giants were blocking her path or anything like that. She chose to help people out along the way because she's a nice and compassionate person.
Yeah, I mean, I basically fell in love with this character through these two experiences. One full experience. Of course.
As Matt would put it, yes.
Yeah. I meant to, I think CrocoKyle was one who asked, he asked a question for the main review, said, I haven't played the first. Will I miss a lot of what's going on, or is it okay to dive right into? And I meant to say it was one full experience, and I forgot to say that specific phrase. So CrocoKyle, just to let you know, I think this is one full experience, and we don't get, like, this is, I mean, it's not a Mass Effect kind of one full experience kind of thing, but it's rare for sequels to kind of like tie in so directly to each other, especially with so many years separating them. Yeah.
I will also mention though, too, that on the other side of the coin, I could very realistically see someone play just this and not having to play with the first one with just a repack and be totally fine too.
Yeah, you'll see me struggle to answer that question on the review. I'm like, technically you could get by and still play it, but you're going to be wondering why I'm so hot on it. Like, I think if you play just this game, yes, you can understand and you can kind of like, fill in the blanks and connect the dots, those kinds of things. But I just don't think any of it carries nearly as much weight if you hadn't gone to hell.
No, you definitely get way more out of it if you've played the first game.
Yeah.
100%, 110%. And
it's not like a huge lift to do it.
Yeah. If someone's listening to this spoiler thing, Sean, and hasn't played the first game yet, like, go back and play the first game. What are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, why are you here?
Yeah, because you might not have felt the same way we have with this discussion, and it might just be because you didn't play the first game. So go play that.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty key part to it. And it'll help calibrate you to what this game really is about, how long it is, like the themes and all that kind of stuff. It is pretty dang required, I would say.
Of course. Now, Sean, there's two things I want to ask you about real quick. Number one, first of all, how did you feel about having followers this time around, having people around all the time? Because in the first game, it's just Senua basically by herself for the whole game. Like, I thought that was actually like a really refreshing change of pace, and I liked the other characters that she was hanging around with, like getting to know them as well. Like, I liked that aspect of this game. I thought it was cool.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack here for sure. It made it more interesting to be interacting with other people. Just inherently, a cast of character fleshes out a world, so like that makes it more interesting. Number two, I think it is completely perfectly in line with the theme of the game here, which is to help others and to like kind of connect with others versus the first game, which was very much a deal with your demons kind of story. So it made sense for her to run into people here. And then the third thing I think when you bring this up is I felt like having other characters involved here, like helped bring the story along much more smoothly. In the first game, I felt like it went from this section of the game to the next section of the game. Like you went from, a couple puzzles to you need to do the two bosses and then you got to get to the shards. Like it felt very video gamey. Whereas this one, it felt like, you'd conquer a certain area and then you'd run into somebody and they would bring you to whatever the next scenario was, rather than sort of just being wherever Senua would wander into next. So it just felt like it fed the narrative a little bit more fluidly. Yeah,
it felt like in a lot of ways, the followers helped lead the direction of the story. Like they were
100%.
They were almost like the storytellers, which is why, John, I love the idea of having them come back as the narrators if you actually unlock all that stuff. That's so cool.
That is so great. And I've only played the first chapter once again as Master Slave Son guy, Thorgson.
Yeah, something like that.
Mr. T, I think is he's called.
Or something.
Mr. T, yes. Yeah. Dude, and like, it's not just a little different. Like this adds so much color and I haven't I will genuinely go back and replay these. Now there's two things that show up after you beat the game. You can play it again with alternate narrators, which we're talking about. What's the other one that I'm forgetting what the third thing that shows up there is?
I'm pretty sure it's Dylan.
Oh, Dillian. Yes.
Yes. I'm pretty sure it's Dillian who actually does the narration back from the first game.
Oh, it's so
you don't hear
good.
His voice in this game, in this game, but you hear him in the first game.
Right. Oh man. Oh, so good. Yeah, because it's I think it's locked actually, unless you beat it a second time.
No,
yeah. So
it's not that you have to beat it a second time. You have to get all the collectible.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So Kevin can see this. Kevin's like, guys, bring me on.
Of course. No, I do want to go back and get the collectibles at some point, but I just wanted to wait for a guide to come out first before that happened.
Yeah, same. I'm not gonna.
Yeah. I think Becca already has a guide up, so I'll probably go back and look at that.
Yeah.
But so I loved that aspect. I felt like it just having extra characters through the story just really helped the pacing, but also just really add a lot to the game's narrative in a lot of ways. So I'm glad that they just made that decision. And you're right, Sean. It definitely helped with the theme of this one. But also, I have to ask you, Sean, in the forest, when it asks you to choose a person, who did you choose?
Oh, dude, I was already moving towards the lady warrior Viking lady because I wish I could undo it. Okay. I would have chosen Nice Man instead of Warrior Lady.
I love these names we made up, Sean, but they're perfect.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. But I didn't realize it was a choice until as it was happening. I'm like, no, I don't want to.
I love the voices are like, you chose her?
Totally.
No? Yeah.
No, that's, oh man, yeah, we did the exact same one. That's a great question.
Yeah, we both did the exact same one, but I was like, did you choose the nice guy? What would have been different if I chose the nice guy? So.
Well, and that was an interesting piece too, where you decide that you're going to go into this place and it doesn't sound like it's a sure thing, but you got to do it. It's your choice. And then almost instantly, like, this was a terrible idea and everybody's a god or everything. Everybody's
everyone just goes like poofed out in smoke and you're just walking around this haunted forest. Like,
like that's in there too. Oh my gosh. I love it so much. Yeah. But yeah, I wonder like, does everybody survive if you do it the other way?
I'm pretty sure they
around?
still do, but I love the idea that it gives you a choice. It almost reminds me of the first game where the game is like, you know, you only have so many lives before like the rot gets to you and you have and permadeath sets in, but that's not actually a mechanic in the game and you're just fine. So it kind of like does that a little bit where it like teases a mechanic here, but it doesn't actually.
Yeah, that was a lie, right? Like that was not really.
No, it was 100% a lie.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah, it wasn't actually real. People actually tried it afterwards to see if you could. Like I think there was a streamer who did it, died 250 times, and nothing happened.
I love it. Yeah, I remember. I think it was Fulia was just streaming this and going like, "What? Like I don't want that to happen." Or Fee maybe. I think it might have been Fiona. I think it was Fiona was doing it in the Discord there. Yeah. Nice.
Like, I can't die too many times, or else my save's gonna get deleted. And we have to start over.
Can you imagine? Yeah.
I'm glad that they didn't do something like that this time around. But this was like this was almost like a callback to that, which I liked.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
What else you got? You got any other?
I was gonna say I was just about to ask you because like I think we might be all.
I think we did it.
I think you know the chips are on the table, Sean. We people know now we really enjoyed this game and then there's lots of great moments. As you can tell.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. As a game that I love very, very much. I don't really want to put it down yet. I think I'm going to play through at least one more time for the extra narration. I think that is really interesting. I'm just not ready to let go of the game. And this has another plus as far as like how long it is I'm not replaying other games that are too long. I want to get this additional layer of experience through it, even though I'm typically one to like completely turn my nose up at that kind of thing. I'm not ready to be gone from Senua and this space and this story. I want to experience it again. So I'm glad that there's replayability. I wasn't expecting that. I excitedly took a screenshot and shared it with the carpool crew. I'm like, oh, this is really a nice surprise for us. So
yeah, I was gonna say if it was just the collectibles like the first game, Sean, if you got all the collectibles in the first run, you'd have no reason to replay it unless you wanted to get the story again. Mm-hmm. Whereas, you know, with the extra narrators, I think there's an actual genuine reason to go back as well. Totally. And I'll go back eventually. Again, I have to play other games right now, Sean, because the window is shrinking before Dawn Trail comes out, and I need to get the Final Fantasy comes out. So I need to get all the other games I want to play before that comes out. Now. So I kind of need to play other games, but this is definitely one I'll go back to before the end of the year because I definitely want to revisit it again before Game of the Year time for sure.
Nice.
Because it's going to be up there. It's definitely like easily one of my favorite games I've played this year. If not, I said it even in my tweet. It's probably my favorite Xbox Game Studios game in the last 10 years. Full stop.
It is definitely, I mean, it's funny, like I threw out the best character ever kind of thing out there before. I'm like, and for me, that's a certain thing. I'm almost there with you on that. I just want to check my books. You know, I want to check my references.
Oh, I went back. I was like, I liked it more than Psychonauts 2. I liked it more than Gears 5.
Same.
I liked it more than Starfield. I liked it more than all
it was finished. I mean, kudos to them. Like this game ran well, at least on Xbox.
I mean, it didn't even need maps to run well, Sean.
Didn't even need maps. Yeah. You don't need maps on this one. You need maps in Starfield, but that's a whole other thing. Ryan Turford. Previous co-host of the Xbox Drive, current host of the PlayStation Drive, where I'm sure you guys will do a review discussion of this game when it comes over there.
Yeah.
At some point.
I mean, you never know. I think a lot of our crew are interested in playing this on Xbox or PC. Or
PC. I heard everybody who owns a PlayStation also has an amazing gaming PC rig.
Please.
Brian.
I think I told you before that I tried to play this game on PC, Sean, and I got through like an hour of it, but before my PC melted, it just couldn't handle it. It couldn't handle the flops. But even still, it looked so much worse just running at 60 frames per second. I'm like, I'm so glad I'm playing this on Series X instead.
Series X, man. Shout out to the Series X. Well, that brings us to the end of the Senua Saga, Hellblade 2 review discussion, and also a spoiler cast with Ryan and Sean. Thank you, everybody, for making it all the way to the end. Please leave comments on the YouTube video, discuss with us in the free Discord, links in the description. Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/carpoolgaming, where you get the Xbox Drive, the PlayStation Drive, the Nintendo Drive, all on ad-free feeds, as well as the RPG Cave, which has nothing to do with this game, I don't believe.
It's not a role-playing game.
There are no role-playing game elements, I think, in this game
There's
whatsoever.
Literally none.
There's one choice that you make whether you save nice man or warrior lady. That is it. That is all. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you on the next Carpool Gaming production. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Xbox Drive. Now, before you drive off, be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and follow Carpool Gaming on socials. Don't forget that we've got some awesome Xbox Drive merch on carpoolgaming.com, and you can also support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/carpoolgaming for exclusive content. Links to everything are in the description. We'll see you next week.